Welcome to Banking on Burlesque, the propelling point of change, with me, Lana Montreese, burlesque and drag movement instructor and coach. During this show, you will discover healing from trauma in a way you never thought possible and become empowered in all areas of your life. Do you feel stuck in a system that seems broken? Are you longing to have meaning in your life? If you answered yes and are ready to change yourself and the world, then you are being called to give Banking on Burlesque a listen. I discovered that healing starts within and would love to help you navigate into a world of sparkle, wonder, and a lifetime of magical change. Banking on Burlesque starts now. Welcome back. I'm Lana Montreese, your host, and I look a little bit different than I did last week. I didn't do the blonde wig today. It's funny because last week, I keep saying last week, it really wasn't last week, it was last month when I had talked to Dr. Pat right before I filmed the episode last month, and she thought I had dyed my hair. She's like, "Oh wow, you changed your hair really fast." I was like, no, I didn't. I just threw on a wig, which is a lot easier than changing your hair. But I thought I'd give today a little bit of a different feel. So this is all natural curls. And I've noticed that anyways. So let's go into the episode today. So I'm going to start a little bit and just recap what we talked about last week and just emphasize, because I didn't really emphasize much or go into some of the vocabulary that I used in the burlesque community that people that aren't familiar with burlesque may not know. And I realized this because I was also tasked recently with writing a 2,000 word story about myself, which doesn't sound like a lot of words, but when you have to recap a little bit about your life, but also give enough detail to where you're not leaving people a little bit clueless on what's going on. Anyways, so I'm going to go along and talk about a few things from last month and then also highlight some of the words that people may be unfamiliar with. So first question, though, I'd like to ask is how we start off every burlesque show, and that's how many of you have been to a burlesque show? Raise your hand. If you haven't, that's great. If you have, hey, you already know what I'm talking about mostly. Pretty much all of it. Anyways, so last week I talked about how, there I go again. I'm just going to say last week and it's going to be fine. Last month we talked about how I stumbled upon burlesque through a coworker and just was enthralled in the glitter and sparkle and just had to get involved. So at the time I was, like I said, really struggling, not only personally, but also just career-wise and friendship-wise. And I even had, my anxiety was so bad that I used to pick at my skin. So when I found burlesque, it really opened the door for me to find a place and a safe space for me to learn how to grow into myself and to really heal the trauma that I had lived through up until that point. And even more life trauma that happens just because life and humans and Earth. So let's see. I started in the burlesque community 9 years ago, and my start after I ran the merch table for the festival was a stage kitten, or basically a stage assistant. It's where I go around and pick up little stripper droppings, as you say, as you will, or whatever. So go between acts, pick up the clothes, pick up the costumes gingerly, and also set up acts any setup, tear down between acts. So did that for 2 years, and also during that time was able to get a firsthand view about how producing shows worked. I was able to work really closely with a producer of the troupe at that time when I started, and be involved in a lot of the admin work and legwork to help some of the local productions that we had. Oh, 2 years went by, and then I decided that I wanted to shimmy myself on stage. And that is when, sorry, I got a little off topic here, not topic, but sidetracked. So stage kittening, performing, I've been doing, I just hit my, I think I said this last episode, I just hit my 7 year performing, and I was in this 2000 word, circling back to the 2000 word little essay, I could guess, story about myself. It's really interesting to see how far I've come and where I started in such a short amount of time. And it really speaks volumes to the type of healing and the ability to give yourself the permission to fail, and the liberation to be able to get back up and do something over again. I got into performing, and one of the most visceral memories I have was probably about a year into performing. We were doing a rockabilly festival. Our troupe went down to Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. If you don't know what Truth or Consequences, New Mexico is, look it up. The history is great. I'm born and raised in New Mexico, so I love our history of my little state that nobody really knows about. So, like I said, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, or TRC. We had a show there, and it was when a really good friend of mine was producing like a paint and play. So they'd have a band, and she would paint and then auction off her painting. Well, she had us perform there a couple of times, and one of the times, the very first time, um, it was in a bowling alley, and we were using the women's bathroom as our dressing room. So it's essentially closed off to the general public, but if people needed the bathroom, that was, yeah. So these little girls, probably about 5, 7, around that age, needed the bathroom. So they, came in, and they were just very reserved, and, like trying to walk past us and go to, to the stalls. And as they're leaving and walking out, I just remember hearing one of them be like, "Oh my gosh, they're like princesses." And that memory is probably one of the memories I will always hold on to, and know that I really love what I'm doing, and it is my heart and my soul, and it is why I am enjoying sitting here and telling you about my story. Whew. So, well winded. Anyways, another story I'd like to share that I have noted here. This is just leading up to a really big turn of events in my life. I had a lot of great opportunities while I was performing with the troupe that I was in in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I met so many great people because I was able to be a part of the same festival that I did the ran the merge table for. A couple of years afterwards, I did the stage kitting for that festival. And, people from all over the country would come and perform. And one of the people I met, she had a birthday, and it was basically a private birthday party where it was performers only, but we were all performing for her birthday. And one of the performers, I wasn't meant to perform that night. I was just there just to watch and hang out and have lots of birthday mischief fun. So during the birthday mischief fun, or prior to, while we were getting ready, we got word that one of the performers wasn't going to be able to make it, which happens. Sometimes you have to call out from a show, which is unfortunate, but just like a job, you don't, especially with COVID and everything that's going on now, you don't want to go to work sick, the things. So we had a performer drop out, and I just remember a birthday girl coming into the back room where I'm getting ready, and she's like, "Hey, did you bring an act with you?" I was like, "No, I did not bring an act with me." She's like, "Well, would you like to perform tonight? Because I would really like it if you performed tonight, because I had someone drop out." And I was like, "You know what?" Peeked at what extra clothes I brought and what underwears I had and undergarments I had, and was like, "You know what? I can make something work." So I made something work, and that was the very first time I did an improv act, so to say. And that's when I really knew I liked what I was doing, and I was doing something that um that I would be doing for a really long time. Um oh, Sue. Do 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 do. I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take a little breather because I need to quench my thirst, and we will be right back. And we're back. Thank you so much for having a lovely break with me. Like I said, I needed to quench my thirst. Talking about myself can be a little bit exhausting. No, I'm just kidding. um, but really, I am a talker, but at the same time, I'm a very reserved talker. I like to save my talking for special occasions such as this, or when I have a microphone in my hand at the show, which I only recently started doing. I didn't really think I would like the way, well, I didn't really think. There for a while, I didn't really like the way I sounded. Um, my voice, I can so this podcast, and even me getting on a microphone at burlesque shows to do hosting, has been a effort of self-love and learning to appreciate and love all of who I am, not just me showing up to be a pretty face when I perform. So I digress. Anyways, as I was talking about my love for improvisation after about performing for about a year, maybe two, that was when around the time that it was like there's this thing called BurlyCon, and in the burlesque community, I mean, it is what it sounds. It's a con. It's burlesque, and people from all over, not just the U.S. but all over the world, go to BurlyCon, and it's just a weekend-long experience of learning and not having to be made up, but just being able to show up and be you, and be in yoga pants or pajamas and take classes and learn from one another and network and just, feel the magic of being around other performers that share this like very loving, big passion for the same art. And so my very first BurleyCon was about 10 years, was at their 10-year anniversary. So I was getting a little bit of an extra experience just because, at like a 10-year anniversary, they go a little bit like, everyone has to go a little bit extra out on their 10-year. I mean, next year I'm going to be in the community for 10 years anyways. So BurleyCon, it's in Seattle. That was my first time not really out of New Mexico, but into a big city that wasn't Denver, Colorado. Nothing wrong with Denver, Colorado, but that was really the only big city I had really visited up until that point. So I was really excited to go to BurleyCon. My flight was, I actually really remember like all the events leading up to BurleyCon. It was really kind of a fun incident. My flight was super delayed. So because there was weather or something, I had a layover in SFO, San Francisco. And I just remember getting to SFO and my layover flight was leaving and running across the terminal. And as I got to the gate, they were like, "Oh, are you, boarding for Seattle?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm boarding." They're like, "Well, we're about to shut the door, so you better get inside." So I got inside and I made it to Seattle. But when I got to Seattle, my luggage did not get to Seattle because my luggage was not as fast as I was. So I was without luggage for about half the day, which was fine because I was able to go to Target and get a couple of things, just get a couple of yoga pants and a toothbrush and belongings to last me for half of the day. Or maybe it was the whole day. I don't know. It was BurleyCon and Seattle in November. Oh, one of my favorite times. It's kind of funny because people talk about Seattle or the Pacific Northwest in the winter or in the fall, and it's just rainy and depressing. And though that may be true for some people, I thoroughly enjoy the Pacific Northwest and Seattle during the winter and rainy months. It's a very nice, like, sit at home and drink coffee and stare at the window kind of time. So came to Seattle, did BurleyCon. Woo, BurleyCon. It opened my eyes to see that there was so many, the burlesque community was vast, not just so many, it was vast and wide, and it went in all directions. And even though I might have been having a hard time back home with the people that I was involved in a community with, because, there's always going to be conflict and drama that happens between people and groups of adults, groups of any sort of humans that come together for some things. People are going to be very passionate, very driven, and sometimes that may cause people to not act like they normally would and under normal circumstances. Anyways, things. So while I was in Seattle after BurleyCon, there is also a Sunday night Sugar Shack. So this show actually happens once a month, and it is a all BIPOC and queer monthly review. I said monthly. It's in Seattle. It's at the Theater off Jackson. The Sunday night Sugar Shack during BurleyCon, after BurleyCon, it's like the last Sunday that. Anyways, it's like it's Sugar Shack on steroids. Is the only way I can put it. So Sugar Shack is already like a melt your face off, like like experience altogether. But when you experience the like the amazingness of BurleyCon, and then stacked upon that, you experience the magicalness of Sugar Shack on steroids. I like my mind was blown. And like I said, my face melted off. And I just didn't know that there was this level of talent of burlesque that existed in anywhere. So I had only been exposed to the burlesque that I had seen, at the festivals that I worked, and the local shows that I did, which were really great. And even some other bigger festivals in Colorado. But oh boy, did they bring down the house at Sugar Shack. So yeah, it was really easy for me to like just not only, so I had already fallen head over heels in love with burlesque when I found it, or it found me, and just fell into my lap via a coworker. When I went to Seattle, I was at a crossroads in my burlesque career. So to say, it wasn't really a career at the time. It was more of like a burlesque passion and joy that I loved. I was at a crossroads and was actually thinking about possibly not continuing on with burlesque just because of other things that were going on in life and in the background with people. So, but I decided to give BurleyCon a try. I was like, well, you know what? If I'm going to not do burlesque, at least I can do this one thing and say that I did it and be able to, close this chapter in my life and it be okay. So I couldn't do that after experiencing BurleyCon and after experiencing the amazingness that was just Seattle burlesque community. They are a different breed of community that I haven't found anywhere else, but also I've been involved in a handful of different burlesque communities. So, but I haven't been to all of them. So I can't speak for all of them, but I know that out of the ones I've been to, Seattle's a really, really wonderful burlesque community to be able to get involved into and with. So, Seattle felt like home. And I remember just being at one of the cafes right before Sugar Shack. We were having a green tea cheesecake with some tea, chai tea, maybe chai tea, because chai is just, anyways. And it was rainy and gloomy, and it just felt like home. Oh, and then I got to, explore Seattle a little bit more. Went over the floating bridge, which is a really cool experience. I hadn't been over a floating bridge before, and that was wonderful. And I just got to see the sound. If you've not been to Seattle, I 10 out of 10 recommend going to Seattle. If you've not performed in Seattle, 10 out of 10 recommend performing in Seattle. So, I went back to Albuquerque, New Mexico after BurleyCon, and I was just starstruck. And I remember going back to work at my day job because remember at this time I am still working at the bank. Yes. So I should preface this too, because the show is called Banking on Burlesque. And I feel like it's self-explanatory there. And I did go a little bit into it in the first episode about how my day job was at a bank. So at this point, I'm still working at the bank. I am still a banker sitting at the desk wearing, my high heels and my professional clothes and talking to people about money. So I remember going back because I was on vacation. I was on PTO. I was getting paid to go to BurleyCon and Sugar Shack, which was great. I was on paid time off, vacation, went back to work. Oh, and I remember getting on the company's website and looking for open positions in Seattle to see one, what the pay increase would look like, and two, what type of positions they had open, if they had my same position open, blah, 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 bureaucracy. So I found that they had about, I think, two or three positions that were the same position as I held in Seattle. So I approached my manager and talked to him about it and said, hey, what would I have to do if I wanted to request a transfer? And he said, well, you talk to me. And then after you talk to me, you talk to HR and ask her to get you connected with the recruiter wherever you're wanting to transfer to. So he said, where are you wanting to go? And I said, oh, well, I'd like to go to Seattle in about 6 months to a year, pay off some debt, build up a little bit more savings and get prepared to go to Seattle. As branch manager at the time, we had an interesting history, but he at that very moment in time, he was strictly my branch manager, and he we had been friends, but at that point, we weren't friends. It was just like a professional, but at the same time, he still held that like level of like, friendship for me. But anyways, didn't mean to make it sound awkward. It wasn't. Anyways, I'm gonna stop making it sound awkward. And anyways, he said, well, why are you going to wait 6 months to a year? And I said, well, so I could build up savings and also pay off some debt. He's like, if that's your excuse now, that's going to be your excuse in 6 months to a year, or you're going to have another excuse. And kind of stunned me with that response. And I just remember kind of stopping too to think about what he had just said. And I was like, you're right. And he was right. And so I didn't wait 6 months to a year. I got back on the website and I did exactly what he said. And oh, it was liberating. But I'm going to go ahead and take a step back from that because I got really excited with that story. We are going to take our second break. And when we come back, I'm really excited to share what happens next. And we're back. So I left off with one of the most exciting moments and pivotal points of my life was when my branch manager just retorted at me, why am I going to wait 6 months to a year to move to Seattle? And surprise. So like I said, I went back to my desk and looked up those positions, and I pulled up my emailed my recruiter. And she called me and she says, hey, I can get you in touch with the recruiter from that area. She did. That recruiter contacted me, told me what to do, which was basically, just apply for the position. Then they would be in touch to schedule out interviews. And the ball was rolling. And the ball didn't stop rolling. And banking bureaucracy with interviews and stuff, it takes about a month and a half process. You go through your initial interview, and that's just them making sure that the role that you're applying for, and that your manager is on board and knows that you're not things. Then your second interview is usually with a branch manager. So I had the interview with the branch manager that I applied for, which was great. And then usually there's sometimes a final interview, and that's if the area regional president wants to also interview or just have a conversation with you. But anyways, passed all my interviews with flying colors. Got the job offer. They tried to lowball me on my pay. Luckily, I'm a banker and I know maths. I did my maths. And I checked, and they were offering me less than what I should have been getting paid. So anyways, brought that up to them, said, hey, no, this isn't right. I need to be getting paid this much. So I got paid that much. They came back with right exactly at what I asked for, because that was right exactly at the money. Anyways, got the job. Then I started looking around for apartments, got an apartment. I put a deposit on an apartment I never even saw before. I did a virtual tour and kind of looked around on the computer, Google Maps and stuff. But yeah, put a deposit down an apartment I never saw. And this all happened November. I got back from BurleCon in December. I was able, locked in the interview, found the apartment, and made the plans to move by the middle of January. Um, the very fast turnaround on the ability for me to move to Seattle. Oh, it gets me like exhausted even thinking about what all I did in that short amount of time, actually. Anyways, um, so in that time though, I had a going away show, and during the going away show, I lost my place because I got um, so for my going away show to Seattle. So it was actually New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, like New Year's Eve burlesque Mardi Gras themed. Was it Mardi Gras themed? No, it wasn't Mardi Gras themed. It was like burlesque themed. New Year's Eve, like fancy little ball at the local bar back home that one of my high school friends owns. It was called Borrachos Brews and Booze, and it's not there anymore. But she has another endeavor that she's running a restaurant, and it's amazing. But the going away show was a really fun experience. It was the first time. It was the second time I got to perform back home, and I got to perform burlesque around people that I went to high school with and in front of my grandma. Yeah, my grandma's gone to about, I think, 2 or 3 of my shows by now. Um, I love when I have my grandma in the audience. It's great. Um, so we're celebrating me going away. We're celebrating New Year's. We're having a grand time. And I just remember, I think it was right before the show, I was talking to one of my friends from high school, and he says, "Oh, this is so amazing that you're doing this and you're going to Seattle." And he's like, "I love that you're following your dreams." I looked at him, and it's like, I don't ever remember sharing with this person what my dreams were. Like, I barely figured out that burlesque was my dreams, maybe 3 years, 4 years before that. And this person that I've known, for a large chunk of my life is like, "I'm so happy that you're following your dreams." It's like, "How do you know what my dreams are?" And he's like, "Oh, don't you remember that one time that you were just extra sloshy on alcohol?" And apparently a friend of mine and I were having a little drunken dispute out in the street, technically, one night years before. It was a birthday night, I remember that. And this person said, "Hey, let's go into this space so that we're not out in the street having this debate, very loud drunken debate." And it was inside the theater at our little small town. We had 2 little theaters, and it had a stage because it was not just the movie theater, but it used to be an old school theater. They're still there. They're still beautiful, but they just don't work right now. Um, so we're there on the stage, and we settled our debate, and I am just like, "Oh, I love this stage, and it's been my dream since I was a little girl to be on a stage." I don't ever remember. I remember it now after he told me the story about what happened, but I did not remember what he was talking. I did not remember that, like, out of recall memory, just on my own. And I looked at him and I was like, "You know what? I am following my dreams. Thank you very much. I'm proud of myself. I'm following my dreams. Even though the ball got rolling in my day job and through banking, I was able to make the transfer out to Seattle and be able to afford that move. But it gave me the ability to continue to follow my dreams. I would joke in my day job when people ask me, "Oh, what brought you to Seattle if all your family's in New Mexico?" And I say, "Oh, the money, there's more money in Seattle. So that's what brought me here. And I'm in the money business." But in all reality, deep down, the reason why I moved to Seattle was because I wanted to be a part of that burlesque scene that I got to witness at Sugar Shack, the one that just melted my face off and reignited the fire in my heart for burlesque. So I don't know very many people. Well, I actually do know a lot of people because a lot of people in the burlesque community have similar stories to me, which is great. So I don't get too into a lot of specifics. Like I'm telling my story and I'm getting into a little bit details of what my story entails, but with trauma and with other things that I've had to overcome, there are so many burlesque performers that have such, similar stories to me, and not to discount or discredit what I've been through and how it brought me here, but just to kind of reason why I sometimes glaze over some things. But anyways, um, following my dreams and deciding that I could either be a really, really incredible burlesque performer based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, which don't get me wrong, I love Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's, one of my homes. That's always going to have a place in my heart. My family's there. Um, or I could be even a mediocre burlesque performer in Seattle. Like, to me, that felt like it just spoke a little bit more, I guess, on my burlesque resume. It spoke a little bit more of what I was able to do. I went from Albuquerque to Seattle, and it, it was like I gave myself a promotion, in a sense, is how I looked at it. So I shimmied my way up to Seattle, Washington. I packed up my car with as much belongings as I could fit in it. I had a little Ford Focus. And I put my little dog in the passenger seat, my little Dallas dog. He's a little chihuahua. I have the picture of us still when I just had the car jam packed, and we headed off on our little three day journey to the Pacific Northwest. Um, made some really fun little stops along the way. Got into Seattle, and it was just great. I did get homesick at first. I I remember talking to a friend because she's a burlesque performer that wrote a book, and in her book, there's a line that says she actually moved from Portland, I think, down to New Mexico. So she moved from the Pacific Northwest down to New Mexico. And she has a line in her book that talks about the first time she ever smelt rain in the desert. And she describes it as um, it smells like longing. So that always hit very close to home in my heart because I'm a desert child. I was born and raised in New Mexico. One of my favorite smells is the rain hitting the desert and that smell of longing. And my first round of homesickness in Seattle was me realizing that the rain didn't have a smell. Talking to her, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, the rain doesn't have a smell here. It's just wet. It's just wet. And I remember her saying, well, maybe something else can have smell. Like maybe you could find a smell in the sunshine, or I don't know, something like that. And I did. Seattle taught me a way to find to appreciate life in a different way. I found out who I was and what I could accomplish on my own when I just really wanted something. And I pushed myself to do it, I guess. But with that being said, we're going to go on our last break. And when we come back, I get to finally talk about what I teased about talking about last month, about how I got to find this whole community of Transformation Talk Network and Dr. Pat, and ultimately banking on Burlesk. So let's go on a break and be right back. And welcome back. And this is going to be our last segment of today until next month, not next week. So like I was saying, got to Seattle and it really opened my heart and my ability to just do me and myself and essentially start over like on a clean slate. I felt like it was the time when I needed just a fresh start. And New Mexico, because I was born and raised there and I did have lived through a lot of trauma growing up from childhood up into adulthood. I just needed a fresh start and a sense of my ability to do things on my own. I'm talking in circles, but anyways, I did burlesque. I performed. I met so many people. I networked with some really great, amazing humans. And I realized that my day job was beginning to be less of just a means for me to be able to afford, living and performing and doing everything I wanted to do. But I started to realize that it just ate away at my soul and it wasn't a healthy relationship. And and I'm sure many of you have been in a toxic either relationship with a friend or a family member or even a job. So I was at this point where I realized that this relationship with my job was very toxic. And I actually jumped around between two different banks after I got to Seattle because I just had some difficulties with my current management at my old company. So bounced around a couple of times and realized that it's just the same thing at every institution. Not the same exact thing, but it wasn't the work anymore. It wasn't like I was trying to find something that wasn't there in my day job. And so that was when I made the big decision to leave the comfort and security of having a 9 to 5 job and having benefits and a 401k. And that was hard. And I gave my 2-week notice. In that time, I had stumbled upon Transformation Talk Radio. I saw a position out for, someone in the sales team. And so I started emailing with with Jessica with the network. And, she said, essentially, it's a different position than I was ever used to, but it just made sense for me. And it was something that I could utilize the skills that I had learned in banking, essentially customer service, but also being able to show people and help them understand how pivoting and investing in a certain way into yourself and in your business can, help to elevate and boost your reach. So I did that, and that was where I got my first taste of this whole universe and wide, vast array of podcast and video streaming. I was able to see how Dr. Pat worked firsthand with how she signed on new hosts like me. And I remember that I don't even remember. Oh, I had probably been doing, maybe it was a couple of weeks in, where Dr. Pat was like, I feel like you need to see what goes into having a show. And she actually offered, like, she's like, let's have you have a show. And I was like, whoa, like, I don't think at that point in my life, this was 2019. And in 2019, at that point in my life, I was not ready to have a show. I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I wouldn't know what I would even talk about, like, in a show. Interview people. I don't know so I declined her very generous offer to help me and do a show at that point, just so I could have the understanding of what went on behind the scenes outside of what my position was. So, oh, that was where I say that this show, the Banking on Burlesque, and me finally deciding that I no longer needed banking to do burlesque. That's where it all began, unbeknownst to me. Unconsciously, I was already creating and formulating what would end up being today. And I really love that I've been able to come full circle, especially after we all experienced the trauma together of the pandemic, and how life can just change in an instant, and we never know when things can come to an end. So that's why I felt it's important for me to start this show. And even though I joke about it, I'm like, it's just basically me talking about myself for an hour. It's me being able to share my story with you on how I stumbled into this healing art of being able to embody yourself and be empowered in who you are, and it not just on the stage, but in every aspect of your life. And like I was saying, I'm not the only performer out there with this story, or I'm the only person out there that's living my story, because obviously it's very unique to me and myself. But I'm not the only one that has had a similar situations happen. So if my story connects with you and touches you in a way where you say, hey, I feel like I could do that. I want to be empowered and I want to feel like that, even if it's not to get on stage and perform in front of an audience, which I know can terrify some people. And I know I, to this very day, get butterflies in my stomach when I'm about to go on stage. I get butterflies in my stomach when I'm about to get on air. But yeah, if this resonates with you, you know where to find me. I have my website. I'm on social medias. Reach out. LanaMontreese.com. So with that, we will close the show, and I will be back next month. Thank you. You have been listening to Banking on Burlesque, the propelling point of change, with me, Lana Montreese. Tune in every fourth Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com. Like I did, you will discover that healing starts within, and I would love to help you navigate into a world of sparkle, wonder, and a lifetime of magical change, and become empowered and heal from trauma through burlesque with me. Visit LanaMontreese.com. That's LanaMontreese.com.